Hey, what's up everybody, it's Lids and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're taking another look at more cards coming from the new The Tide Rises expansion coming out July 11th. There will be 36 new cards, including 6 from each faction, and today we'll be analyzing the Nilfgaard reveals. So to start off, we'll have the Imperial Marine, which is a 4-power, 5-provision human soldier with flanking, zeal, order. Choose a card from your deck. At the end of your turn, move it 1 position toward the top of your deck. If it's on the top, boost self by 1 instead. So this is a flanking soldier, which means maybe Imperial Formation is the deck that you want to use this in, but it doesn't have any direct damage, which is usually what those Imperial Formation soldier decks use, and other units are more in need of the armor than the Imperial Marine would be, so maybe that's not the best fit. It does have deck manipulation, so tactical decision might be better for that. The simple thing is to put strong cards closer to the top of your deck so that you can draw into them more consistently, but you also have cards like the Mage Assassin for more damage, or Albric for boosts. And although this card can get boosted if you choose the top card in your deck, I don't believe it shows you your deck in order, so you'd have no way of knowing which card that is. Basically, that boost is a way for you to still get value even if you chose the card that was already at the very top of your deck. Next, we have Imperial Fleet, which is a 4-power, 5-provision machine ship. It has Zeal Order, infuse an enemy unit with, at the end of your turn, damage self for each active flanking unit on the opposite row, charge 1. That means that whatever card you infuse on your opponent's side, you want to have flanking units on the opposite side. And because Imperial Fleet itself does not have a flanking ability, that means you'll have to have other flanking cards on the board when you use this. So that could be the Imperial Marine, or it could be other flanking soldiers. And because you can only have 2 flanking units in one row, that means the infusion would max out at 2 damage per turn. And if you do that, the damage is strong, but you're committing yourself to damaging one unit in particular. So once that unit gets destroyed, the damage from this infusion obviously stops. So for that reason, you'll want to either target a unit that already has a lot of power, or a unit that might be small but has the potential to grow in the future. Otherwise, the infusion might only give you a few points of damage. That means Imperial Fleet synergizes a bit with status decks, but you don't want to lock, because that'll block the infusion, and it isn't great to combine with poison either, because you don't want to remove a target that you've already weakened with that infusion. So combining this with other status engines, like Thirsty Dame and Tibor, may be better. You also could combine this with Philippe, but if the infusion is the only status that that card has, then Philippe will lock that card and that blocks the infusion. And if the card you targeted already has 2 statuses, and you're looking to poison it with Philippe, then once again that means that you're going to remove a card that you were already committing a lot of damage to. Combat Engineer is also an interesting consideration because it can give you an extra charge, which would make Imperial Fleet a lot more dangerous. So overall, that makes Imperial Fleet quite versatile. It could either be for pure damage in an Imperial Formation Soldiers deck, or you could use it in a status deck with Imposter or Imprisonment. Next, we have Battle Stations, which is a 10-provision tactic special card that plays up to 2 bronze cards from your hand, then draws however many cards you played. And this looks busted, because it might be the second most versatile card in the entire game after Oniromancy. Playing 2 cards, 3 if you include itself, in 1 turn is already incredible and good in any deck that can afford it. It's easy to play 3 tactics in 1 turn for tactic decks. Technically, it's at least possible to do even more than that if you're using Imperial Diplomacy against Nilfgaard, which gives you huge control potential from the tactics themselves, plus gives tons of charges to Helga and or Fire Scorpions, which could somewhat easily help you wipe the entire board in just 1 turn. But the use cases here are almost limitless. You could play 2 flanking cards in 1 turn, you could play an engine and also a setup card in the same turn, you could play 2 engines so your opponent can't answer them both, you could play 2 point slams for tons of tempo, you could play 2 copies of a bonded unit. You could also trigger both chapters of Masquerade Ball in 1 turn for super tempo, and it's technically possible to do that for the Eternal Eclipse as well, although it's a lot more difficult because you'd have to use Magni Divisions to make it happen. So the possibilities here are almost endless, and that power and versatility makes this card insane. Then we have the Catriona, which is a 5-power, 10-provision machine ship that is named after the plague, implying that this is what started it, which gives you a hint what this is going to be about. It has flanking, and the order is to poison a non-poisoned unit with at least one status. At the end of your turn, gain a charge, charge 1. So because it has flanking, that means if you played in the melee row, you'll get 2 charges per turn. If you played in the range row, you'll get some armor. And this also looks insane. So much so that you might think this is an automatic round winner, but it's not quite as straightforward as it seems, because the 2 conditions on the order make it far less effective. The target must already have a status, so you need something else to apply that first status to whatever unit you want to go after. You also can't poison a unit that's already poisoned, so that means the Catriona will never be the card that removes something with poison itself. You'll always need something else to apply that second poison. So for that first condition, you'll want either a status engine for something other than poison, like Emir, Tibor, Philippe, Altibald, or Alba Pikeman. That's probably the easiest choice. Or you use a deploy status ability every turn. Then because the Catriona is only giving the first poison, you'll also need something to supply the second poison every turn. So for that, you'll need either another poison engine, like Philippe, Rot Tosser with some setup, or Moral, or you'll need to use a poison deploy ability every turn to remove a unit. That actually means that it takes a lot to have Catriona plus those other combinations of card remove something with poison every turn, and likely requires several turns of setup if you're using another engine to do some of those things, giving your opponent some time to either lock or destroy one of those key cards, shutting down this combo. Deploy abilities would be harder to stop though, because your opponent can't stop those with damage or locks, and Nilfgaard still has plenty of ways to get that first status you need before you use the Catriona, and also that second poison. So that might be a little bit slower, but it seems like that would certainly be more consistent. For those reasons, the melee row flanking ability for extra charges may sound great, but because you'd never be able to use the Catriona's charges on the same target, and you'd need even more sources of other statuses, it would be really difficult to sustain that setup. But maybe you move the Catriona between the melee flank and the range row flank depending on the situation. Because if you can't make use of the second charge, you might as well put it in the range flank to get extra armor and make it harder for your opponent to remove it with damage. But even if you only get the single poison and don't have a way to get that second poison for removal, you could still benefit from the statuses with cards like Thirsty Dame, Ben Morlehem's Servant, or Tibor. In total, that means this card has huge upside in status decks, Imposter or Imprisonment, and will probably get spammed a ton once it gets released, but I think it'll be a bit of a trap because it's surprisingly difficult to use, so it definitely pays off to be prepared for both how to play this and how to stop this. Then we've the first of the new Nilfgaard legendary cards, Admiral Rampali, which is a 4-power, 12-provision human soldier aristocrat. With a Zeal order, choose 3 enemy units, then give them Lock, Poison, and Spying in that order. At the end of your turn, boost self by the highest number of statuses on a single enemy unit. That is a ton of stuff, so you can kind of think of this as a combination of Thirsty Dame, Alba Armored Cavalry, and Mage Torturer minus the Assimilate, combined into one card. And if that sounds ridiculous, that's because it is. Obviously, you have tons of statuses giving you both control and tall removal. Spying is probably the least useful of those statuses in a vacuum, but it's another status for Thirsty Dame boosts, and it sets up the Catriona, as well as Bayonet Turncoat, Coup, and Terra Nova. That already might be worth 12 provisions. Then I believe it is every turn that this card gets boosted by the highest number of statuses on an enemy unit. That means that you need to keep a unit on the board with a lot of statuses every turn to maximize the boosts. Obviously, he's giving you lots of statuses, and you're definitely going to play this card in a deck that has lots of other statuses, but the tricky part of that is that a lot of those statuses will be poison, which means a lot of cards will get removed by poison, so you might have to deliberately hold back on poison removal to get bigger boosts on the Admiral. However, with so many other ways to get other statuses from any card that can give you Lock, Spying, Doomed, and Fusions, it's not that difficult to keep one card alive with lots of statuses on it. Before you use that second poison to remove a card, you could even transfer all the statuses onto a different card with Van Morlehem's Servant, so that you still have something to boost up the Admiral. So optimizing the engine value is probably overkill most of the time, but that's a nice luxury to have. And he's also an aristocrat, so you can combine his order ability statuses with the Masquerade Ball effects and possibly remove an entire board in one turn. Basically, this card does everything, so it has almost no weaknesses. Sure, Veil can block statuses, but you'd need to have a ton of Veil to block all the statuses that these new Nilfgaard cards can supply. And even then, the Admiral is still at worst a 1 point per turn engine. Certainly not good for a 12 provision card, but even counters can't counter this card entirely. there will probably be a lot of people asking for it to get nerfed or even hotfixed, and it looks like that might be deserved, because unless I'm misinterpreting something, as it stands, it looks like he might break the game. Then lastly, we have Bakala, a 13 provision artifact location, presumably where the recently added Sandor card is from. It has resilience, deploy, spawn Imperial Fleet to the left of self, and Imperial Marine to the right of self. Those, of course, being two of the cards that we spoke about previously, and collectively, they have 8 power, and both of them have Zeal orders, which means you will be able to use those order abilities as soon as they get summoned in. There are some minor synergies between these two cards. The Imperial Marine is a flanking card, which means you can immediately get at least 1 damage on the Imperial Fleet infusion, which means this should be worth about 9 points of tempo at a minimum, unless you get additional immediate value from the Marine ability, or you already have 2 flanking units in the other row, or use Imperial formation to swap the fleet's position with a flanking unit to get 2 of your flanking units in the same row to get 1 more point of damage from this infusion. On your next turn, you could use Bakala's order ability to do that swap, or save it for some other Imperial formation-like flanking opportunity later, because that order ability is very similar to Imperial formation, so you could use this in Imperial formation soldiers decks, but the Marine is likely better in tactical advantage decks, so you could use Bakala in a tactical advantage deck and rely on this order ability for a mini Imperial formation when you need it. Overall, Bakala is almost like a scenario. You get 2 units that have some synergies together, and 1 additional effect on top of that from the order ability. It's slightly cheaper than scenarios at 13 provisions, it's probably not quite as strong, it might have more tempo turn 1, and it does have resilience. So overall, the new Nilfgaard cards have a combination of some things that are versatile additions to almost any deck, and then ones that are harder to optimize but unbelievable if you do. And in those cases, the difficulty of using those cards feels like the main thing balancing them, but I don't think that's enough to hold them back. Nilfgaard may have just gotten 2 of the strongest cards in the game, and unless other factions get even stronger cards, it looks like Nilfgaard might be about to dominate. So what do you think about the new Nilfgaard cards? How strong do you think they're going to be? And what ways do you want to use them? Because in some cases, the options are almost limitless. Let me know what you think. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.